wrecking yard. I met my true love down in the wrecking yard. I met my true love called a wreck Chevrolet, which I see every day.
Hi, welcome to another episode of The Wrecking Yard. My name is Tony. I'm still the head cheese around here. When I found out I was going to spend a little time in Nashville, I contacted Deke Dickerson and asked him if he knew anybody in Nashville who liked to talk, had a lot of funny stories, and wouldn't mind having a couple of strangers in his house. And today's guest, Chuck Mead, was the first name on the list. And I gotta say, it turned out to be somewhat of a jackpot. I enjoy talking to other people about music, but I don't like to take over the conversation, and sometimes I can be guilty of that. This was the perfect guest, because with very little prompting, he told story after story that were pretty mind-boggling. Not only that, we got a pretty good history of BR549 and what he has been doing since the breakup of BR549. I saw BR549 several times when they were still around, and they put on a hot show every time I saw them. There's a deep back catalog there for anybody who's curious. That back catalog also extends to several really excellent solo records, and as I found out, and you will find out in the podcast, he's done a lot more than just that. You may hear another voice in the podcast. That would of course be longtime Wrecking Yard intern Nashville Woody, who, as usual, was helpful in ways that I needed help. Also, there's some strange sort of edits towards the middle of the podcast. This was when Jesse Dayton showed up to borrow some equipment. If you're not familiar with Jesse Dayton, I would suggest you check out his back catalog as well for some very, very excellent music. So the nice thing about this podcast, like I inferred before, was that I just didn't have to do much work. I would just bring up a subject and then sit back and let the chips fall where they may, so to speak. I might add that the night before this interview, me and Nashville Woody attended the Marty Stewart Psychedelic Jamboree, which was one of the best shows I've ever fucking seen. We were both pretty much kind of on a musical high all of the next day, which made the conversation, I think, a little livelier. But still, like I say, if you don't like to hear me talk, you'll love this podcast, because I hardly had to say anything. And by the time it was all over, I felt like my musical IQ had actually increased a couple of points, because this guy is a repository of knowledge like few others. As a matter of fact, even as I left, the conversation still went on. And I left it on at the end because I think it was kind of funny that we literally kept talking until I was almost to the car about an article that Deke Dickerson wrote about his quest to find Cliff Gallop's guitar, which also, if you go on the internet and look for that, if you've got a couple hours to read, it's worth it. I would like to extend my thanks to Deke Dickerson for providing the hot tip, and also a very, very sincere thank you to Chuck for allowing someone he doesn't know into his house and giving up a couple of hours of his afternoon. Whenever somebody does this, I'm always extremely flattered and extremely grateful, and I always want the guests to know how much I appreciate it. So without any further ado, I take you to perhaps the coolest man shack I've ever seen in the heart of Nashville for my talk with Chuck Mead. I met him sort of by accident. I don't know how familiar you might be with the legendary Stardust Cowboy, but his drummer Joey Myers played with Deke for a short amount of time, and we were on the car on the way to a show. I'm just going to set this here, and I think it'll be just fine. You notice this app I got that I really like. It's an old-fashioned tape recorder.
Yeah, it's cool. I got that too.
Yeah.
It's great. And it works great too.
Yeah, it really does.
And it's easy to work, which is good for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, when you're on the road and doing this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're talking, and this is right after Hollywood Barn Dance came out. And everyone in the car is like going, "Oh man, have you heard of Hollywood Barn Dance? Have you heard this?" And blah blah blah. And Joey goes, "Hey, I'm gonna call Deke," and it was like 2 a.m. So he calls him on the phone, and then he hands the phone to me, and he goes, "Say hello to Deke." And I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" And then he just grabs the phone. "Hey, that was the dude that did the movie, blah 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 blah." And then I was like, "Okay, good night."
I'm sorry I didn't get to watch the movie yet. It was a kind of a busy week. No, you didn't, but you said you would.
If all I need is a proper email address, and I
sure.
can send it to that.
Yeah, I'll give it. I happily, because I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and he worked.
Because I don't know much about that guy.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, believe me, you'll find out more than you want to know. And the odd thing is we worked on it for a long time. We had a lot of hurdles. Our house got broken into in the middle of the whole thing, so we had to finish it with like borrowed equipment, and it was a bunch of crap. And then almost the minute we finished it, it was like David Bowie calls, "Hey, I'm going to be covering one of your songs on my album. Would you like to come out and play in London?" And then he calls again, "Hey, would you like to come play at this thing out in New York?" And then the guy from NASA showed up. Did you ever hear the NASA story?
No.
You remember, I don't know if you ever, how much, on CNN every once in a while they used to have, NASA woke up the astronauts on the space station today with a little Johnny Cash. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Well, the ledge was really big amongst some of the engineers at NASA. I mean, this is like back in the real noisy days. They just thought it was really funny. I have a picture of them all like holding rocket parts going like this. So one morning they played Paralyzed by the legendary Stardust Cowboy to wake the astronauts up, and apparently shit just started going wrong like immediately. Like things started happening and switches weren't working and stuff. And so an official a notification came down from on high that said, "Do not ever play that song again for the astronauts." So the ledge actually got banned by NASA.
Yeah, sure. It's the recording's fault that all that happened.
Of course.
But people are superstitious. Yeah. But like Billy Joe Shaver says, it's bad luck to be superstitious.
That's a good quote. But yeah, I mean that's just the sort of shit that happens to him. He's just like one long string of bad luck. And some of the luck, he brings on himself too. When he was living in Los Angeles and decided he wanted to do some target practice, instead of going to a range, he just set up some pop bottles in the parking lot of the hotel he was living in, and just starts popping off shots at these bottles. And of course, the police show up within a minute. Yeah, they show up within a minute. And when the ledge tells the story, he always goes, "And then they conveniently handcuffed me." He always puts the word "conveniently" before handcuffed every time. So
I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll send that. And like I say, now there's some other people that are currently doing something about the legendary Stardust Cowboy. They mined a bunch of our footage, and I went out there and talked to them. But I think they ran into money problems.
Where's he from?
Lubbock. Went to the same high school as Buddy Holly, and he was there the same time Joe Ely and Jimmy Dale Gilmore were there.
Texas.
Yeah.
Within 2 seconds if you're talking to somebody from Texas, because they'll tell you.
Yeah, actually Les brings it up fairly often.
What is it? What is it that's saying? You can always tell a Texan, but you can't tell them much.
But yeah, when you watch it, you'll just be, because we ended up talking to all of them, Joe Ely and Jimmy Dale Gilmore.
And all those guys, they
really
knew
cool.
him and everything.
Oh, they said that he was a big party. Whenever someone was having a party, they go, "Hey, make sure you get Norman over here." And he's got all these stories that he'll take his guitar to school, and then he'll stand up on a toilet in a stall and put on a concert in the bathroom. It's pretty crazy. I just kind of got hooked onto him by accident. He became this big mysterious figure. We finally went out and met him, and then all I did was ask him a bunch of questions because I wanted to know. And by the time it was over, we were just like, fuck, there's a movie in here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it took us so long. I told this woman once, I said, well, I'm working on a movie. And she goes, how long have you been working on it? And I said, oh, 8 or 9 years. And she goes, God damn, what's it about? Time?
Yeah, really.
And I was like, well, we didn't have computers at that point. He works at the local Fox station in town, and we were literally sneaking in there after hours at night.
Where are you guys from?
Indianapolis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We just played there.
Yeah, it's not the coolest locale ever, but it's okay.
No, I like Indianapolis. You should have come to the show.
Oh, I
It was a great show. It was we did a tour earlier this year called the Cosmic Conky Tonk Review, and it was me and Jason Ringenberg from the Scorchers,
sure,
and Jim Lauderdale,
who we just saw last night.
And my the Marty Stewart thing. My band backed everybody up, and it was pretty fun.
Well, my problem right now is currently I work nights, but also because I don't go to a lot of shows because I have fairly bad tinnitus.
Oh, well. I get it.
Yeah, I tried to make a list once of all the bands I'd seen, and I could put in parentheses all the bands I've seen without earplugs. And after about 600, I was like, fuck it. I've seen all of them. So.
Yeah, I know Mission of Burma took a lot of my hearing.
Yeah, and
you know that band?
Yeah, from Boston. And I think one of the reasons they broke up was because what Roger was having some.
When I saw him, he had those flight headphones on while he was playing bass, and it was just loud as fuck.
It doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you're like trying to sleep, it sounds like somebody's running a sweeper in the next room, like constantly. Yeah. It's tough. Or even better, the best way to describe it is in the old days when you turn on a TV, like the first 20 seconds you don't see anything, you just hear that.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Don't believe me, I get it. It's an F. Mm. The note is F. It's really, really high, but it's F. Mm-hmm. So I just start singing songs in F. Try to forget about it. What do you want to talk about?
Well, what I usually do is I just start at the beginning, and then I just let you tell your story on up. I don't generally get into like anything too serious or politics or anything like that. Mostly just funny stories, anecdotes, to talk about stuff you like.
I'm sure it'll come.
Cool. Yeah.
I have to warn you that at 11 or so, Jesse Dayton's going to be walking through the door because he's borrowing that amp.
Really?
And that bass.
Really? I wonder if he'd be impressed if he knew I have his album on my on my iPad.
He'd be grateful.
Really? Yeah, it's really
as anybody would.
Yeah. I don't know which one I have, but whatever the last one was, and it's really good.
Hey, it's never your last record.
Hopefully.
It's always your latest record.
Hopefully. Right. Okay. Yeah, you're right.
Carl Smith said that. That's a great lesson to learn.
Yeah. So and the reason I started this was twofold. One is, I'm 59. I used to own a record store. I'm pretty well versed in music, but as I get older, I realize I don't know as much as I thought I did. And I just thought this was a fun way to meet people and learn stuff and get their stories. But also, I started listening to Mark Maron's podcast.
Fucking great.
It is great, except when he has musicians on, and then I just get so frustrated I want to start pounding my car. And an example is when he had David Crosby on. Did you listen to that one by chance?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so he's talking to David Crosby. He's like going, blah, 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 blah. And then he goes, so you were in the Byrds. Yeah. Okay, what came after that? And I'm like going, dude, you just skipped 5 years.
Yeah, right.
5 years of probably really good stories about, almost getting in a fist fight with Chris Hillman or whatever. Just right over. And then like about a month or two later, he had Robbie Robertson on. And he goes, you know what? Did you know the band was the same band that backed up Bob Dylan when he went electric? I didn't know that. I'm like going, fuck, my mom is 70, and she's never listened to a Bob Dylan album in her life, and she knows that.
But yeah.
So I just started thinking, maybe I think somebody could maybe do a little better job. So I said, well, what the hell? And that's when I started.
All right.
Yeah, he had John Cale on there once, and I'm like going, okay, cool. Take him to the day that he got fired. Just go through that day. Did you get a phone call? Did you know it was coming? Were you going to quit anyway? Glossed right over it. Just there are always real obvious things that I think that I would ask that he never does. And so He does great with comedians. He does great with actors. But when he has musicians on, I'm always shaking my head. And that David Crosby was the biggest one. Because I'm a fairly big Byrds fan, and there's not really a whole lot out there as far as personal musings about. Well, I don't know. Did you see that thing with Van Dyke Parks where they asked him, about people he met in Hollywood, and he says something about, yeah, he says Charles Manson seems like the second worst person I've ever met. And the guy goes, well, who was the first worst? He was David Crosby. just like that. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember one time I'm buddies with. Well, maybe you got to turn this on.
It's on.
Oh, it's on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I was buddies with. I'm still buddies with Phil Kaufman, who was the Road Mangler.
I didn't know I read his book. Yeah, I didn't know he was still alive.
Yeah, man. I have dinner with him every Sunday. We have a little group of people. Yeah, good. But he's doing a thing tonight. You should go to. It's at the Great Escape Record Store.
Okay.
It's at 7 p.m. It's on Charlotte.
We're going to be in town, so.
You should go see that because he's going to be giving his Graham Parsons talk.
Really?
Yeah. But he was hanging out with all those Manson people.
Well, a lot of people.
In fact, they live right next door to the La Biancas. Maybe they got the wrong house. I don't know.
Oh.
Because, it was all because Charlie didn't get a record deal.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
talk about bad luck, man.
Yeah, it was bad luck. But it's all redemptive in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It all comes.
Yeah,
it's much better.
Yeah, we saw that. We didn't know it was going to have an alternate ending.
I loved it.
And when it happened, I'm like, oh, they're going in this direction.
It's so gratifying because it's like Inglourious Bastards where they kill Hitler.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But
I wish it had really happened like that.
I
don't want these are spoilers for people that haven't seen it. But
anyway,
one time,
if they haven't seen it by now, then it's their fault.
One time years ago, we were playing in BR. We were playing down in Biloxi, and it was a big festival. And Emmylou was on the show too, and that was when the Mangler was still out with Emmylou.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jay, our bass player, and Shaw and I went over to another stage because Ronnie Dawson was playing at a different stage, and we wanted to see that. Of course, anytime you get to see Ronnie Dawson,
I saw him once.
He was fantastic. So we come back to the bus, and I open up the door of the bus, and I hear Phil in the front lounge of our bus with a bunch of people, and I didn't hear the story. I just heard the punchline to the story, and it was like he said. So I said to him, Charlie, I knew you were a murderer, but I never thought you'd lie to me. Followed up by, I've fucked more murderers than you've ever met.
Yeah, his book was fantastic.
Yeah, he's a piece of work and kind of a treasure, really, for stories. Because he was also an extra in a bunch of movies and TV shows in the late 50s and
not the 50s,
early 60s. Every now and again something crops up where he's like some, driving some Zeppelin dressed as a Nazi.
Right.
Oh, there's Phil.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I worked as an extra for like 10 years, from like 2001 to 2011. So if you ever watch Constantine with Keanu Reeves,
oh right,
I'm the first demon he kills in the end of the hospital.
Oh good.
Yeah, I'll pop up on various TV shows and whatnot. So.
You still get residual checks?
No, I never got residual checks.
That's because you're an extra.
Yeah, I was just guy with clipboard, guy with briefcase, jury member, stuff like that. It was I'd tell my mom, hey mom, I'm gonna be on, Without a Trace tonight or whatever, and she'd watch it and she'd call back and well, I looked, but I didn't see you. And
but you had your SAG card, right?
No. But I was SAG eligible, but I just didn't do it because once you got your SAG card, you got less work.
Really?
You get paid more for what you do, but you get booked less.
Yeah, but you get free DVDs in the mail every season.
Yeah, that is the nice part. It's funny, the legendary Stardust Cowboy, because he's a member of the Grammy thing, he gets like free CDs and stuff all the time.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Yeah, but no, I just I didn't really want to be an actor to begin with. I just kind of fell into it. Some guy told me, he goes, hey, you got kind of a weird look. You should go down and sign up at Central Casting. Now usually I have all my hair cut off, but I have these sort of vintage glasses and I had like a ducktail and the slick back sides and stuff, and so I got booked in a lot of like 50s and 60s stuff. Do you remember that show that was on for a couple of years that took place like in Philadelphia during the American Bandstand era, and they would have like different like big stars. I think they had like Blink 182 playing the Kinks one year or one week, and like Jennifer Love Hewitt played like Leslie Gore one episode.
Wow.
It was just took place in this American band.
What was the name of that show?
I'm trying to think. I think it was American Dreams, maybe. About 2002, 2003.
Man, I don't remember that show.
Yeah, I'm working on the show.
And I remember Cop Rock.
I actually kind of like this. So, but anyway, so look, you see these glasses, right?
Yeah.
They're pretty vintage looking. You know, this is what I was wearing. This guy comes up. He's got this big case of glasses. He's looking at mine and he's like, I don't know. And I'm going, really? 1963? I think it's all right. He says, I don't know. Hold on, let me look. So he goes rifling through his case of glasses and he pulls out a pair that looked exactly like these. He goes, here, try these instead. And they were the exact same ones.
Yeah,
so,
they got to justify their existence.
Yeah. I found wardrobe people to be the people I'd like to deal with the least.
I dealt with a bunch of wardrobe people when I did there was a TV show called Sun Records.
Yeah, we were going to get to that, but go ahead.
Ooh, yeah, and so I lived in Memphis for 4 months, 4.5 months, because we were filming there, and I hired all the musicians to be musicians so that when they either played to the track or we did it live on the set, they could either do it or look like they're doing it, because that's my major pet peeve in any musical show like that is, they're not really playing that well. In our show, they were.
Right.
And the first time that I did something live on the set, Roland Jaffe, who was the director, said, "Oh, let's do that again." So it kind of made my sphincter contract quite a bit. And that was actually a job. I haven't had a job in 30 years, but that was a job.
Right.
And the wardrobe people were, I would come up, and the hair people, I would hire a musician, and they're like, "Well, he's bald. Well, we're gonna have to wig him then." I'm like, "Well, then fucking wig him."
Yeah. Well,
Don't give me any shit. I hired this guy because he does a thing,
And they had bald people in the 50s.
It's not all about your wardrobe,
right?
Although it is. That's an important cog in it, and it was great because my wife and I had tons of vintage clothes that we sold to the production.
Well, that was handy.
It was really great. A little extra on the side. Yeah, and I rented out my instruments to the production.
Oh, that's cool.
But I just wanted it to be right, because there was so much of that show that was kind of fabricated, and there was a lot of stuff that they put in that they really didn't have to because it's TV or whatever. For instance, in 1953, Elvis is riding around on a motorcycle in it, and we're like, okay, he lived in the projects.
Yeah, motorcycles
and
were
he didn't
expensive.
have a pot to piss in. But he has a motorcycle, but that looks cool, it's Elvis.
Well, it does look cool. It is Elvis.
Well, yeah, but it's that kind of, and I know we weren't doing a documentary, and I think that mostly it was pretty great. There was some
I thought it was all right.
But I just wanted to take care of the actual legacy of all those guys, including and especially Sam Phillips, in that it's the music. It was my same role that I did when I did the stage production, the $1 Million Quartet. We're really playing rockabilly music. They're up there really playing and acting and talking and singing like their characters, and it's hard to cast people like that, but since it became popular, there's a lot more people that want to do it.
Right.
And I'm not really involved in many of the productions of that anymore. I have a couple of troops that I look after, but it's, that's over 10 years I've been working on $1 Million Quartet. It's kind of a...
Right. Well, you're talking about
gift.
Your pet peeves. I used to have a record store in the 80s, so I know what labels look like. What my big pet peeve is when somebody on a movie or something gets out a record, puts on the needle, and it's not the right label, or they put the needle down in the wrong place on the record.
Right.
I have two pretty good examples. One is, did you ever see Finding a Friend at the End of the World? It was where the end of the world was coming, and these two people were like laying there waiting for the asteroid, and he pulls out a Scott Walker record, but he plays the Walker Brothers, The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore. And I'm like, well, that song is not on that record. And shit like that just drives me nuts. But in Argo, towards the end, when Ben Affleck plays Led Zeppelin, the heavy one, the one that wasn't a hit, was just When the Levee Breaks.
Right.
Yeah, it was the right label, and he set the needle down in the right place of the record. And I was like,
Well, that's detail.
Oscar.
Well, that's what we tried to do in that show too. I mean, they recreated the old Memphis Recording Service place in a big warehouse, and the inside of it's like I wanted to record in that place because they put some of the tiles up. Well, they put the tiles up exactly like Sam did, and actually had tiles that aren't even there in the real place anymore that Sam had. And it was extraordinary. And you can go see a couple of the set pieces now at Graceland. They donated, the production donated those sets to Graceland,
right?
And so you can see how it was recreated. And man, it was a joy to go to work every day. It was a lot of hard work, but man, I had a lot of fun and met a lot of really cool people. And now I know I could do music for movies and television.
And
so if anybody's out there,
yeah,
I'm looking for work always.
Well, there's a guy in Indianapolis who claims to have the original reel-to-reel recording unit from Sun Records.
Oh, really?
So theoretically, it's in Indianapolis.
Oh, really?
Now, I would have thought that would have already been like either in Graceland or at the Sun Studio Tour or whatever, but he claims that he has the original one.
Well, I'm going to have to talk to Matt Rossbank about that because he would know.
Well, I'm wondering
definitely.
Well, what I'm wondering is maybe there were more than one, and maybe he got one that was used later or whatever.
Well, now that could be.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to him when I get home. I have an appointment.
But there are people that know that.
Yeah. Well, this
guy. There are actually people that would come in and go, okay, well, and this year Sam changed recording machines. But early on, he didn't have any money to do that. They were ready to repossess his board at one point, Yeah, and he just recorded Rocket 88.
Yeah, it's amazing he lasted as long as he did. I mean, because I know there at the beginning things were tight. Bills were, like you said, the bills were coming in faster than the money.
Tenacity and vision.
Yeah.
And that's what that was the whole spirit of Sam Phillips, is like doing it like nobody else. Man, that's different. In fact, we met him one time. He came to a BR 549 gig in Memphis, and he showed up, and we'd met him before when we were playing with John Fogerty over here at the Ryman. He showed up backstage, him and Sonny Burgess and DJ and Scotty Moore. They all showed up, and they were in our backstage hanging out. And so then Fogerty came out because he wanted to hang. He was hanging out in our dressing room,
right?
Because he wanted to hang with those guys. But when he came to one of our gigs, and he said to me, "Man, I like you guys because you're real different." And at the time, I took it as one of those, Southern passive aggressive. Oh, that's real different.
Right.
That hat's real different. But in retrospect, that's one of the highest compliments that could have gotten paid to us, was that you guys are different.
Yeah.
Because we were, we weren't trying to exactly duplicate all that old hillbilly and rockabilly music, because that's just stale. You have to put your own emphasis on it, and we always had original music.
Right.
And
yeah, I saw you guys like three or four times.
Yeah, you can't, you have to take it into, like when we were doing that down on Lower Broadway, it was like, a lot of it was from memory. We would like, we had to cover 4 hours, and like, I kind of remember that old Ferlin Husky song. Why don't we try to do that? And then, you learn how to kind of play it right, but we played it in our own style. Mm-hmm. It was still in the vernacular.
Right.
But that's what makes it different. And that's what rises it above just being some sort of museum piece.
Right.
Because you don't want to do that.
No.
I mean, Deke does the same thing, man. That's all Deke. The way he plays, it's pure and it's real, but it's Deke.
Yeah. Well, I was going to mention, and I'm going to try to only use this word once, but you were sort of, I don't know if you realize this or not, but you were sort of responsible for a lot of people in my age range getting to country. I grew up in a house that was openly hostile to country music. My mom made fun of Narvel Felts for my childhood. She thought it was the funniest name she'd ever heard. She made fun of it. It was hillbilly music. It was below us. We listened to the Beatles. We listened to Cat Stevens. We listened to Andy Williams. We don't listen to that stuff, And so I had a real dim view of country music, with one glaring exception being Johnny Horton. But I didn't think of, when I was a kid, I didn't think of Johnny Horton as country. I thought of him as this guy who sang these historical songs, and I was really into history, so it was kind of cool. It wasn't until much, much later, and like I said, BR549, Jason and the Scorchers, Tex and the Horseheads, Rank and File. I mean, all this stuff that came around the same time, and here's that word I'm going to use, the sort of cowpunk explosion there early on. You know, it doesn't sound so much today. Today you're like, oh, okay, cool. But back then it was fairly revolutionary because you're wanting to hear this punk rock, and all of a sudden there's this twang coming through, and you're like, well, what is that? Is that supposed to be there?
There wouldn't be a BR549 if it wasn't for Jason and the Nashville Scorchers. Man, that, you know, I was heavily into that music. You know, when I grew up in high school, I'm roughly the same age as you. I grew up playing in my folks' country band. And my mom's family was musical. They had a radio show in the late 40s, early 50s on KNEM, Nevada, Missouri. Uh-huh. And they were the Wines family, and they were part of this thing called the Hayloft Gang, and they played old hillbilly and western and gospel music. They had a 15-minute show, and then they kind of fell out. You know, my mom, they got into high school and they started, you know, playing basketball and hot rodding, and then rock and roll happened, and you know, they always kind of still played, but they, you know, around the house. Like when I was a little kid, I thought my uncle and my grandpa wrote all those Hank Williams songs. I didn't know, you know, it was just music to me. And then, you know, you realize what's going on. But when in the early 70s, they decided to put a dance band together and play like, you know, different programs for like rural electric associations and Eagles and Elks and Knights of Columbus and shit. And I got a drum kit for my 12th birthday. So like I became the drummer now. But I was always the guy that sang the Chuck Berry and the Elvis and the Carl Perkins. My uncle was way into Carl Perkins and Dwayne Eddy. Our theme song was Rebel Rouser. So you played that at the beginning. So, you know, I was always into that kind of music. I was the freak in high school that, you know, everybody's buying their fucking Styx and Foreigner records, and I'm going to get Chuck Berry and Elvis.
Told me mostly the same thing about his upbringing. He said he would hang out with these hippies, but he didn't really like their music that much.
Well, there was some of that shit I liked, though, you know, and I was a real fan of AM radio. Like, I can still listen to Billy Don't Be a Hero and get kind of misty. or Lido by Boz Scaggs, you know.
I'm big on Edison Lighthouse.
Yeah, I'm into that, and the Beatles, because the Beatles were the best damn rockabilly band to ever come out of England.
It's a weird quote, but it's good.
Well, it's true.
Yeah,
it's really true. I mean, George went to Carl Perkins' funeral because they were so close.
Right.
And so, but when the punk rock explosion happened in 1977, my best friend went on a high school summer trip to England and brought back all these records by like bands called the Boomtown Rats.
Yeah, and a friend of mine did the same thing.
And the Clash and the Sex Pistols, and so I got into that because it reminded me of more the do-it-yourself rock and roll from the 50s and the early 60s that I really loved.
And it was more fun. You know, it was fun to listen to.
Well, yeah, it was, and it just didn't seem so bloated as, you know, Fleetwood Mac or something.
Oh, they were the enemy. Them and the Eagles, I mean, they were like the enemy.
Lion Eyes is one of the best goddamn country songs ever written.
I'm talking latter day Cocaine Eagles.
Oh, well, you know. Yeah, but those records are amazing, man. Listen to New Kid in Town with New Ears. Go back and listen to that record because, and I was like that too, you know, but that is not only a great song that J.D. Souther wrote, but the recording is fucking amazing. I mean, just to listen to it sonically, it's great, you know. And I've broken down a lot of my punk rock grudges against bands like that, but Fleetwood Mac is still the enemy. I get it.
No, it's funny you mention that because now that I'm older, like I have friends that really like those Fleetwood Mac records, and I'm like, I'll listen to them and I'll go, you know, I'll admit they're pretty good, but in my mind, I can't get it out. I cannot get "You Are the Enemy" out of my mind.
Well, I know it's
for
hard.
them, you know.
It's hard. But then, you know, so I wanted to be in a rock and roll band. Suddenly I wanted to break out of what, you know, my folks band. I was still playing with my folks. I think I still played gigs until I was like 19 or 20. You know, when I changed to guitar, my uncle moved down to Texas, and then I would get one of my buddies to play drums so that, you know, I could have somebody to get stoned with.
Right.
But I formed a band, and it was, you know, it was reminiscent. I was really into Nick Lowe too because I loved all that pub rock. And I loved his records, and so I had a little pop aspect to what I was doing too. But then I saw Jason and the Nashville Scorchers, and I thought, wow, that kind of ties it all together for me.
Yeah, the first time I saw them, it was. I'm like, my mouth was agape. I was like, here's these guys, they're twanging, but that dude over there is playing really hard. I mean, Warren, he was just going on a tangent.
Oh, Warner, his big group is AC/DC.
Yeah.
But he's fucking hillbilly.
Yeah. Well, you know
you know what I mean? That's a true story, and he wouldn't be mad at me saying that at all.
Now, one of the last times I saw them, because they played Indiana fairly often. One of the last times I saw them, it was like during a blizzard or something, and there were literally like 10 people there. 10 people, like in this huge theater. And they came out and looked, and it would be depressing to most people. And they were just like, fuck it, let's entertain these 10 people.
It's balls to the walls, and that is the country sensibility. These people at least paid to see us. Like I remember one time we were playing this minor league ball stadium somewhere in North Carolina with Charlie Daniels. And I mean, it was raining. It was raining. The promoters were just like, oh, come on. Somebody put some thunder and lightning so that we can get our insurance money.
Right.
But no, it just kept raining and raining and raining. And, we were in the middle of this ball field, and there was probably, in a place that held 10,000 people, there was 200 or less. And they were all out there getting wet, waiting. And we went out, and you play your ass off. And Charlie Daniels went out and killed. I mean, like, killed. And afterwards, because that's what you do, he said, boys, come on over here. And we went over to one of his road cases, and he opened up, and it was like a bar. It was like a little whiskey. He said, we're going to have a little whiskey. Because we played for the people tonight, no matter what, and we put on a good show, and you guys did too. And, because that's what you do. You don't come out there and, those 10 people paid. Mm-hmm. So plug it up.
Yeah.
Do it.
Well,
so anyway, I saw them guys and yeah. So that's when I formed a band called Homestead Grays, which was kind of a country band. I lived in a band house where there was a party for 2 years.
Right. Now, were you living here at that point?
No, I lived in Lawrence, Kansas. Okay. And
do you remember a band called The Embarrassment?
Are you kidding me? The most original band to ever come out of Kansas?
They played in Indianapolis all the fucking time.
Oh, yeah. They were.
I saw them like 10
That's one of my favorite bands.
Yeah.
And Brent Geisman, also known as Woody, ended up moving to Boston and being the Del Fuego's drummer.
I didn't know that.
From The Embarrassment, yeah.
Wow.
And that's one of my favorite bands. I saw them tons of times, man. And I just, what a great band.
Yeah.
You can't make that up. But they did.
Yeah, they were great.
But it led me back on a path, and even at the height of my punk rock thing, where there was a party for 2 years at my house, and I don't mean that there was a lot of parties in a 2-year period. I mean there was a party at my house for 2 years.
Yeah, it
was a band house. I knew who my real friends were at 2 a.m. when I put on Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And didn't get any pushback from it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I was way into that too, Yeah. That it's just part of my DNA, all that music.
Well, and it sounds like you grew up with a lot of country music around you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. But there was a lot of rock and roll. I mean, I was always into the Beatles, all eras of the Beatles. Mm-hmm. A lot of my rockabilly friends, were like, they hate the Beatles, and I got into a argument with some rockabilly dude from Germany years ago about the Beatles. I said, I'm like, you shouldn't be bagging on the Beatles. They were a great rockabilly band. They had all the cool records before you did. Before you were born, the Beatles had all these cool records. You go, you have not seen my record collection.
And the Beatles had to work hard to get them. It wasn't like there wasn't like a great record store in Liverpool. I mean, they had to go down and talk to sailors to get their records.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, hey, can you please bring me back, this, and this? And I think we were talking about this the other day. I mean, like the Rolling Stones, they want all these, these blues records that they can't get. So one guy will get this, this Muddy Waters record that only he has in town, and they all got to gather to his house if they want to hear it.
Let's go over and see the Muddy Waters.
Yeah, and nowadays, when I was a teenager and when I was getting into music, I had that encyclopedia of rock, and I'd look someone up and I'd go, okay, well that sounds interesting, and then I'd find out that everything they did was out of print, And then I couldn't find any other information about them at the library. And so sometimes like a year or two would pass between when I would find out about a band and when I would actually get to hear them for the first time. And now kids are just like, I got my phone, I can hear anything
But that's
in the whole
great.
world. I do. I
To
think
me,
that's
that's
fantastic.
great.
Yeah.
And
Even
you know,
for me,
and as
when I'm
bad as
doing
Spotify,
research.
as bad as Spotify is, it's one of the greatest tools for musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Just simply on a level of, for instance, we did this show here at the Americana Fest called Better Together that we do every year on the Tuesday before everything really starts. And we always have a bunch of guest singers with us, and it's always like a little theme. And so we have to learn songs, you know, kind of off the records before we rehearse it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you just make a Spotify playlist and send it off to everybody, and then everybody has that list and all the music, you know, that you can learn. And then you get together and you do it. It's an incredible tool. Plus, you know, I never heard of that. Is that on Spotify? Well,
Yeah.
shit, yeah, it is. Or YouTube at least.
YouTube is usually where I go. But yeah,
YouTube sounds tons better.
Yeah, but you know
That's my big pet peeve about Spotify is it sounds like shit.
Yeah, that's why I usually go to YouTube.
Neil Young has developed his own app. You can listen to the whole Neil Young catalog on a little app that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, he may be the world's biggest Neil Young fan. So he
Do you have that app?
No, I don't actually. I've checked out the Archives website and all that stuff, but I haven't actually got the app. But we read
were
an
just
article
talking about
yesterday
that,
there's Amazon Prime has a new streaming service that's high quality
Really?
streaming.
Hey,
they just announced it. Yeah.
They just announced it.
Well, I need to get on that.
Yeah.
It's a subscription service, of course, but.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I make my half a cent when someone plays it.
Yeah. But when I'm in high school, I'm reading about like raw power, and I'm like, oh well, that sounds like something I gotta have. Is that a print? I don't think I heard that. I don't think I heard that for like maybe a year or two after I found out about it.
I was on tons of mailing lists, record mailing lists. Well, not tons, a few, just because of that. You know, that was when you had to mail off. You know, like I remember getting a whole bunch of Beatles bootlegs off of this thing called Old Brown Shoe. You know,
back at Trouser Press, I'd go back there, get those, and I just start writing. Okay, that sounds good. I think I'll send them $3, you know, or whatever.
My buddy and I had kind of a scam going in our high school though. You know, because we were on these bootleg mailing lists, you know, you could get the alternate version of Kiss Alive, and I really wasn't a Kiss fan. I didn't really dig that. I thought they were crappy musicians. You know, it's great showbiz, it's great vaudeville, whatever, and I don't look down on anybody that likes Kiss at all. I just personally was not into it, and neither was my buddy. And so, but what we did was we bought the Kiss Alive bootleg, which was not the same Kiss Alive, and I had a stereo where you could make 8 tracks off of your records. You could, it was still transition from cassette to 8 tracks, which 8 tracks actually sound pretty good. It's just that clunk in the middle of the song that I just don't like. But we would tape that Kiss Alive album and then bootleg the bootlegs. We'd sell them to Kiss fans in our high school here. And I'd make up, I'd draw the cover of it, Kiss Alive bootleg, so that they could have it. And so it paid for itself.
Before
and it paid for me to
anybody
get
knew
some cool Beatle bootlegs.
Well, before anybody knew who the Ramones were, I printed off pictures from the inner sleeve of the second album. In graphic arts class, and I sold them as pictures of Kiss without their makeup.
Oh, that's good stuff.
But the thing about Kiss, though, and how old are you?
I'm 58.
Okay, I'm 59. Kiss is sort of a weird thing for me. I mean, I really, really like that specific early period of Kiss because it came about at a point in my life where it was like really necessary.
Well, sure.
And what happened was a friend of mine had it, brought it to school, and I was like, really, that album comes with a book in it? There's a book inside that record. He goes, yeah. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, I got to have this. I'd never heard a note except for there was a night where I was watching Don Kirshner / Midnight Special Friday nights, glued to the TV.
Yeah, man.
And there was a commercial for Kiss, and I remember going, that is the weirdest thing I have ever seen. What the fuck is that? I'm thinking, okay, that's the weirdest thing I'm ever going to see. And then there was a commercial, and they came back, and Kraftwerk was on Autobahn for like 15 minutes.
Okay.
Perfectly motionless.
Now that's the weirdest thing.
Perfectly motionless. Going, and I'm going, what the hell is going on in the world here? But like 6 months later, whatever, my friend brings this thing to school, and I'm like, I gotta have this because it comes with a book. So I go home, I got this Jaws piggy bank. I take a steak knife to it, cut the bottom of it out, shake all the change out, and I gotta walk like 2 miles down the road to get to where it is. So I go down there, and weirdly enough, karma, I have the exact change down to the penny for this record. So I get it, and on my way home, I stop by my dad's house. My parents were divorced, and I stopped by my dad's house because he lived sort of between where we were and where I got the record. And he wasn't there, but my stepmom was. And I go, hey, look what I just bought. And she looks at it and she goes, you're going to burn in hell. That's the first thing she said. And you know what? I loved that record before I ever put a needle to it, just because she said that. I was just like, this must be a great record. It has to be.
And then flash forward a few years, driving and crying, I'm going straight to hell.
Yes.
Just like my mama said.
Yeah. So for me anyway, it was sort of this forbidden fruit that was being dangled in front of me, and so I took a bite and I was okay with it for a couple of years. I mean, there was a point, right around Love Gun where I was getting pretty heavy into punk, where I was like, okay, I'm done with Kiss now. But for a couple of years, they were really huge for me.
Oh yeah, well, like I said, I don't, it's everybody has their own story like that.
But it doesn't mean I don't agree with your assessment either. So.
Well, I mean, and you mentioned Midnight Special. I mean, that's revisiting again in retrospect. At the time, Steely Dan, to me, seemed like the worst thing about the music business. Guys that sit around and do a bunch of blow and do a bunch of heroin and making music and don't even tour, and that's not rock and roll. And so, and it was just everywhere. You heard Steely Dan everywhere.
Yeah.
And I promise you that at sound check tonight, before you go out and do sound check, the sound engineer is going to tune the fucking system with some Steely Dan song. And it's because their records sounded so good. But I have a friend in town who's great musicologist and just personality. His name is Andy McLennan. And he was the guy that ran the label that Jason and the Nashville Scorchers, he and another guy. Anyway, he loaned me the DVD set of the Midnight Special that came out a few years ago, and we were watching it. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a rip-off because you don't get whole episodes, you just get performances.
Right.
But it's still kind of cool. And they had Steely Dan doing Reelin' in the Years, and Skunk was in the band and everything. And I watched that thing, and I'm like, holy shit, that's fucking great. And so I went back and listened to those records. Those records are great.
Well, I'm going to have to try again then, because about every 2 years I think, well, you know what, maybe I should try again. And I like most of the singles, because I even had them when I was a kid, but there's this certain soft jazz rock sound that I just hate.
Yacht rock, right? That's what they call it.
Oh, I'm not even, don't get me started. I mean, this whole thing about ironically liking music that maybe isn't that great, but liking it now ironically just drives me nuts.
Well, I don't like it ironically. I just went back and listened to how they did it, and the sounds on the music and the playing on those records are it's phenomenal. Oh, yeah. And I don't know if I guess I got soft in my old age and not so militant and one-minded, because that's really the antithesis of punk rock. Is you're supposed to be open-minded about everything.
Sure.
And and at the time, it seemed like us against them, because they wouldn't play the Ramones on the radio. I'd call up a radio station.
Oh yeah, good luck.
Ramones. They wouldn't play Cheap Trick, because that was punk rock, which is ridiculous.
Dude, I wore a Cheap Trick shirt to school one day, and it was like right after the second album came out.
Yeah.
And I had people threatening to beat the shit out of me, because they're like, you fucking punk rock faggot, blah blah blah. And I'm like going, dude, it's Cheap Trick. I'm not even wearing my Ramones shirt today. Give me a break.
Hey, that reminds me that Mike Ness has a great quote. He goes, I was punk rock when it was hey faggot.
Yeah.
And that was that's what it was. Just because you looked weird.
Yeah. I had kind of the shortish hair,
Yeah.
And the thing is, this is like 76, 77. We weren't really sure how to be punk. We just knew there was some stuff that we probably should be listening to and should be doing, and we were doing our best. But again, I was in Indiana. I was pretty much cut off from culture.
But I was in Kansas. I was in Lawrence, Kansas.
But you were in a college town.
Yes, and we had a college radio station that played all that. And you saw, and because we were like the last outpost, you know, in the span of probably 2 years at the same place, which was the Lawrence Opera House, which is now Liberty Hall. But in that span of 2 years, at the same place, I saw the Charlie Daniels Band, the Buzzcocks, the Boomtown Rats, Clarence Gatemouth Brown, Muddy Waters, George Thorogood, the Police, and Third World, and Ultravox, and the Cramps. It was all like, you know, and you saw all those people at those weird shows.
Mm-hmm.
You saw it. That was the punk rock at the time. It was
That's
because
how
you were
people.
exactly people that were into nothing, that what you weren't being spoon fed. So you could go to reggae shows and you'd see guys in, you know, in Sex Pistols t-shirts and stuff, because it was something that was real. You could like all that before it got splintered off. Before, you know, well, if you're a hardcore punk, then you can't like this, and it's like, that's rules, man. Fuck you. There's no rules. That's what music is about.
Up until about 83 or so, Indianapolis got virtually none of this stuff, because Indianapolis is not a college town, and a lot of times people have referred to it as the world's largest one-horse town, just because it's a big-ish city, but it never really thought of itself as a big city. So we didn't get a lot of these bands coming through. We had to drive to like Chicago or Cincinnati or Columbus to see virtually anybody. And I tell this story all the time. It's short. But when I was working in the record store in 1980, we get a phone call from the local booking agency. And the guy goes, "Hey, John Cale, that's that guy that does a song about cocaine, right?" And we go, no, you're thinking of J.J. Cale. And we hear the guy put his hand on his phone and goes, "We got the wrong Cale!" So that's Indianapolis in a nutshell.
Kale.
Yeah, exactly. That's Indianapolis in a nutshell around that time period. And also, I don't know if you remember or not, but you know when punk rock first happened, you know, 76, 77, it was a huge fucking umbrella. You didn't just have to be like one thing. I mean, you'd get weird stuff like, you know, Tin Huey or Gruppo Sportivo or all these like weirdo bands that weren't really punk, but somehow or another they would fit comfortably under this umbrella.
Or Para-Ubu or something
yeah, with
like
nobody
that.
bitching about it.
Well,
you know?
it's because they didn't know what to do with it. And that's why they started going, okay, well, these people are new wave and these people are punk rock. And that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I remember when new wave became a thing, and I'm like going, they're just trying to take this and call it this in hopes that they'll make more money from it.
It's marketing people.
Exactly.
You know, it's the same people that
I think it was
they just have to have some sort of thing in the record store so you can go to the genres.
Right. I think it was an ad, a Warner Brothers ad. I think it said something like, "Are you ready for the new wave?" And it was like Talking Heads, Dead Boys, Ramones, and the stuff they had on their label.
Well, you know that Waterloo Records in Austin. That's why I like them. They don't have genres. It's all just alphabetical. That way you can run into stuff.
Yeah.
That you wouldn't ordinarily run into when you were looking for something and it's just in the alphabet.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Jesse Dayton.
Yeah, what I like about that store is they had every Bear family box. So,
oh yeah.
So I'd actually get to touch
Well, come
them.
in.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt.
You're not interrupting anything.
It's Jesse Dayton.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi, I'm Tony, and I'm a big fan.
Oh, hi Tony. How are you? How you doing?
Come on
Are you
in.
guys rolling right now?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can roll. I'll either edit you out or.
Let me demonstrate what you got here. All right. Now that Dayton's all gone. But anyway, yeah, that's my little pop culture corner.
That's cool.
It's not often I see a picture of Elvis I've never seen before.
Yeah, that's Elvis. He's probably 14 years old.
I was gonna say,
and it's
really
at like
young.
one of those fairs where you get your photo taken. But if you look closely, the guy sitting next to him is a dwarf.
Oh. Yeah, you're right. I wouldn't
You
have
see what I'm
noticed
saying?
unless you said something.
What a weird photo.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking. I saw Tim Carroll yesterday, and we were talking about.
I hate that guy.
Yeah, that's what he said.
He's a
He said you
terrible
guys were
guy.
mortal enemies. He said ever since that Robbie Folk song, he says you guys have just been vying for it.
No man, that guy's gold. That guy is gold.
You know, I've known him like 40 years now.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Gizmos.
Yeah, I was their roadie. The reason I was their roadie was twofold. One is because I was too young to get to the shows, so the only way I could get in was like by schlepping their stuff. So they had a free guy to schlep their stuff while they went off to do their stuff so I could get a show. And the second thing was their manager had a crush on me, and so he kept me around.
Good.
Just so he could like hit on me every once in a while.
Well, that's cool.
Well, it was for him, not so much for me, but.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
We'll see what happens.
I was flattered.
It's up to you.
I was flattered, but
Of
I was
course.
like, well, that's not really.
That's always uncomfortable.
That's not my direction, but you're.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, also he owned a record store, so I was highly being pulled in two directions here because I'm like going, a record store. This guy has a record store. Oh, wait a minute. He must have seen me naked. Damn it. So yeah, but
how many records can I get if I just let you see me naked?
Yeah.
You should have thought that way, man. You screwed up.
How much you want for that Clash bootleg again?
You have a Butcher cover? Let's see.
Yeah. So yeah, and and the thing is, I was just like 15 at the time, and just some snotty kid who was just getting into this stuff, and they were all just the gizmos. They were all like really nice to me. They were responsible for a lot of my musical education. I don't know if you ever met Dale, who was one of the gizmos. Now he's in the Vulgar Boatman. He was the only person in the entire state that had a playable copy of James Brown Live at the Apollo.
Oh, wow.
Everybody, I mean, A, the album was impossible to find. B, if you did find one, it was scratched all to hell because it was a party record and everybody took theirs to parties and they get all scratched up.
Right.
Dale had a perfect copy of one. So every time we wanted to hear it, we had to go to Dale's house. Hey, could you play Live at the Apollo again?
That's a great record.
Yeah.
Tim Carroll wrote that song after the hurricane.
Right.
He and I went out on a little trip a few years ago. Well, shit, it's been over 10 years ago now. But we went out and it was just him and me in a car, and we'd do these like singer-songwriter guitar pull things.
Uh-huh.
And he would play that song after the hurricane. I just fell in love with it, and it ended up being on the last BR549 record that we recorded down in Georgia with John Keane, and I just think that's one of the greatest songs ever written. I love Tim Carroll.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And he, like I say, they were always really nice to me back at a time when they could have easily just been like, who is this kid that our manager wants to fuck?
Wow.
Yeah, but like I say, they were always really nice to me. So okay, so the first time you heard "Fuck This Town," or did you hear it on the record and go like, holy shit, he mentioned it, or did you know in advance?
No, I didn't know in advance.
Really?
I hadn't. I think maybe I'd met Robbie, or maybe not. I don't think I'd met him at that point. Mm-hmm. He's the most cerebral of all the alt-dot country singer-songwriter guys of our ilk of that era. And I don't know, I guess I was flattered to say that, you hate Nashville, but at least you don't hate me.
Yeah, but that's kind of what Tim said.
That kind of mentality, though, actually, and I'm not bagging on Robbie at all, but and they do it particularly in Austin. They're just bitch about Nashville. Well, in Nashville, they blah blah blah. We know better, and nah. It's just a bunch of fuck you, man.
Right.
And Nashville to me is still the home of Roy Acuff and Hank Williams, and I mean,
sure,
it's Music City, USA, and you don't. And I know there's a lot of crap out there, but there's a lot of crappy music come out of every town.
Yes.
They don't bag on Los Angeles because of Britney Spears. I mean, it's like I want to say, fuck you.
Right.
Do a little better. Let's see, what do you got? I mean, I like their records. I don't hold anything against them, but it's always like, Austin versus Nashville. And it's like that's not the way it is at all.
Oh no,
it really isn't, because there's people on the ground. I mean, did you go to the Tuesday night honky tonk? You didn't. I didn't see you there because I was there. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I think Tuesday night was the night. That was what I actually talked to Bob Mayer. By the time we got here, I think it was like 10 or 10:30, and we were pretty pooped.
Yeah, I get it. But I mean, that's a scene that reminds me of Robert's 1995. Only, as my wife says, it's like that scene Robert's 1995, only without the danger, because back then Lower Broadway you could get your head bounced off of a parking meter. Hey, and that was part of the allure, though.
Okay, all right. So let me go back to the early days again. When you guys were starting out, along with Jason and the Scorchers and all the other folks. I mean, the idea of country and punk together wasn't really a mainstream idea or something that a lot of people were even thinking about.
No.
Did you get any like blowback or any pushback? Was it hard at the beginning?
Well, when Jason and those guys came out, I was still living in Lawrence. I didn't come down here till 1993. But we didn't catch any blowback. We had found ourselves. There was a whole group of us that had found ourselves because of that. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, man, I can like Hank Williams and Carl Smith and all that, and like the Ramones, and those guys put it together, because there was a kinship. Ernest Tubbs, he was famous for saying that, the reason he was popular is because people listened to his records and go, well, hell, I could do that. Well, yeah, come on down to Nashville and do it. That was the whole thing. And originally, the Homestead Grays, we were going to move down here in '85. But then, I went hitchhiking around the country for a while and busking, and so I just kind of got sidetracked, and then got back, and the Homestead Grays, we got a record deal at a small label there, and so I just kind of stayed there. But us here in BR, our experience was, I moved here because I wanted to get a gig at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge. The place where Roger Miller and Willie Nelson and Farron Young and all those guys hung out. Songwriter, the Hillbilly Left Bank poets, Chris Christopherson, Harlan Howard, Hank Cochran, and Felice and Boodle O'Brien, that those guys would play each other's songs. The demos would be on the jukebox at Tootsie's.
You met Roger Miller?
No, I didn't. I became friend. He passed away before I got here. But I became friends with Dean, his son. But, that's the reason I moved down here, is to get up with the real guys, because that's the only way you're going to learn how to do anything, is to get up with the real people. And so luckily there was still enough of those guys that were still around that, ended up kind of liking us, because, well, anyway, so my first gig here in town, I didn't have a job. My wife and I moved down here with $1,500 and all our junk. And we moved over to this part of town in East Nashville because we could get a whole house for $400 a month, And my wife was going to school down at MTSU and working at a bookstore in the daytime. But I got the first job, and those are air quotes, job, because I looked in the back of the Nashville Scene, the local music rag, and it says "Activists Wanted, Greenpeace." And I remember a friend of mine used to knock on doors for Greenpeace in North Carolina, and I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea, I could, so I go over to the shop, and I get a job as a door-to-door canvasser for environmental, for Greenpeace.
Right.
But it'd be like, hi, I'm Chuck with Greenpeace, the whales people. Not too many whales here in Tennessee, but we got a lot of other water issues we're talking about. Give me $100. It was that kind of thing. And it came in handy when I started working on Lower Broadway, because that's how you ask for tips, because you're playing for tips.
Right.
But the Greenpeace people, after we got off turf, because you'd only walk around from 6 to 9, because after 9 o'clock the shotguns come out if you go up and knock on somebody's door, right? And we'd always go to Tootsie's after turf. And back then it was just one guy in the window playing, and just like, because Homestead Grays had come down here many times to play. We'd play the Exit Inn or Elliston Square, which is now called the End. But we'd always go down to Lower Broadway to Ernest Tubbs record store, and there was another Lawrence Brothers record store that had like tons of great country records in it, and Tootsie's Orchid Lounge, and there was just all peep shows and shit down there. It was derelict. People were like, "You're going down to Lower Broadway? Hey, be careful." And it was a little dangerous, but that made it kind of cool, It's like, so we'd go down to Tootsie's and drink, and one night they said, this guy plays guitar, get him up there and play, and really the guy that was doing it was trying to embarrass me, But I got up there and I played a couple of songs, and I got a gig at Tootsie's, as a reserve picker. And then I worked door for a while, and that was when Farron Young was still coming into the bar, like he called. I had this hat that I had the brim pulled up, and he called me Jimmy Durante. Hey, Jimmy Durante, get me a beer, because I was a bar back / doorman / picker, but he knew I was a singer, And so I felt like, man. And then the Greenpeace office closed, and then a couple of those people got jobs down there too. So it was like, we're running Tootsie's Orchid Lounge. And then one day, down the street, Robert Moore, who had run Tootsie's for a long time, who had just not run Tootsie's, there was a shakeup. These new owners came in, or new bar managers came in, and Robert had this place down the street that was just, it was called the Rhinestone, and it was just all Western clothes and boots and gun belts and tourist trinkets for Nashville tourists. I didn't know it at the time, but that used to be, you know, Shot Jackson's music store. It was where they sold Showbud Steels for a long time. So there's like this sign with a guitar on it and everything, but it, you know, it just said Rhinestone back then. This other guy named Gary Bennett, we showed up on the street at the same time, and we were the only guys playing like Johnny Horton and Ray Price, and so everybody else was kind of stuck in the outlaw era. But it was always emphasized that you play your own music because it's a songwriting town. Tootsie's is the songwriting, you know, there was always, you get a tip, play one of your songs. And, sure. But at the time, you don't have enough material to cover 4 hours, so you play what you know,
Right.
which is Hank Williams and, you know, Patsy Cline and all that stuff. So one day, Gary comes down when I'm playing at Tootsie's, and Robert had put together a band on the weekends so that Gary could have a band. And because he's a great singer, had cool songs and everything, and we kind of had kindred spirits. You know, we'd seen each other, didn't really know each other very well. But he came down and he said, "Hey, the guitar player that's usually playing on the weekends can't play. Can you come down and play guitar this weekend?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And you know, I'm not really a lead guitar player. I'm still not that, you know, I got better, but I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come down," because I played electric in the window. I always had a little Echoplex and, you know, a little more rhythm for me, less strummy. So I go down that weekend, and it was kind of weird because some tourist from Ireland videotaped the very first time that Gary and I were singing together down there, and it just felt so comfortable. We sang great together. And we were like, well, hey, this is kind of cool. This is something. And of course, that guy the other guitar player never came back. And so now I'm working at Tootsie's and Robert's down there. And it's, you know, there's not much happening. There's not that many people down there, but it felt good. And we really wanted to, you know, develop our songwriting and, you know, be an act. So all of a sudden we had this band going, and people would always come in and say, "Are you guys brothers?" And we were like, "No, we ain't brothers." So for a long time, we were going to call the band the We Ain't Brothers. And that was Gary's idea. So it goes on a little while, and I call up my buddy Shaw, you know, from Lawrence, because before I left Lawrence, the Homestead Grays had broken up, and he and I had formed a duo. He was a drummer and I was a guitar player, and we called ourselves Dos Cajones. And we would play sort of rockabilly, country-ish shit, just drums and guitar. But we had drums, so we got kind of band rates. But there's only two, you know. My Aerostar van in one hotel room. It was very economical to go out and play. So I'm like, "Shaw, man, you got to come down. It's a fucking freak show down here on Lower Broadway. It's a different story every night. It's right up your alley. You got." So, you know, I talked him into coming down for the summer, and he ended up, of course, staying and becoming the drummer for BR. And then one day, you know, it was kind of happening. You know, we had this bass player, and, you know, people started coming down, and it was kind of weird. You know, first it was like hipsters. Right. You know, college people would come down that were curious about Lower Broadway, and they saw us up there, and we were, you know, just giving people shit and playing, you know, cool old honky tonk music of our own and other people's. And it started to become a little bit of a thing. So this truck driver who would come through town and always stop in Lower Broadway gave us $50 to make poster for our band. So now we got to think of a name for our band. I don't know what they're doing. So, you know, one night, late at night, we have the $50. It was after the gig. We were in the alley, which shared an alley with the Ryman Auditorium. We were always looking at the Grand Ole Opry every night in that alley, you know, doing what you do at 2 o'clock in the morning in an alley. And we got into the good frame of mind. And we came walking around the corner, and somebody started telling a story. I think Gary was telling a story about Junior Samples from Hee Haw, sitting at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge. He walked into Tootsie's Orchid Lounge one night, and there was a guy sitting there with a couple of girls, and Louie, who was a character down there on the street, and Junior walked in and said, "Oh, Louie, you got a couple of girls on your arm, and I ain't gotten there." And we kind of were laughing about that, and then somebody said the number to call is BR549. You know, we started talking about Hee Haw, and the guy who was one of the guys that was in the original formation of BR said, "Well, that's what we ought to call it, BR549." And we started laughing because, you know, in our minds, this was the last stop. You know what I mean? It's like, I hope I get something, but this is kind of fun, and I'm making money. And so we all laughed and said, okay, that's what we're going to call our band. And that's how we got our name.
So
drug related. Another marijuana related death.
Right. So both the band and band name both seem to have happened by osmosis.
Oh yeah, well, everything. And then we walked down to Hat's show print.
Oh, does the cat want in?
And it's okay.
Oh.
She does want in.
It's okay. I got 2 cats.
So we walk into Hat's show print back when you could do that, and they were just, you know, Jim Sheridan was sitting there with Kevin Bradley and Dub Cornett, and we didn't know how hip those guys were at that point. We just said, hey, can you make some posters for our band? We played down at Roberts down the street. It was when it was still on Broad. And they're like, well, what's the name of your band? And we said BR549. And of course, those guys fell out laughing because they're hillbillies. They got the joke.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, where do we put the hyphen? and here's what Kevin come up with. I don't have it up right now. I'm still work in progress in here. But this was. He said, what do you want to call it? And he said, well, let's just call it Hillbilly Beatnik Music. And so this was the poster that he came up with, the original
before we
one.
leave, let's take a picture of that.
And yeah, so we just kept going, and it just kept getting more and more people down there. And then, you know, we wanted to have an upright bass player, and the guy who was playing bass was a great bass player, Bones Becker. And we're like, gotta get upright bass. And he goes, no, it's hard on my hands. You know, he was older than us.
Right.
And we're like, well, that's what we want, you know. And meanwhile, Gary had a roommate named Donnie Heron, and who was like a spectacular musician, fiddle player. And he was playing in a band that was traveling around, you know, trying to make it. And he always said, all right, and he would come down and jam with us sometimes. He goes, all right, you know, if you guys ever get an upright bass player, then I'll come join your band. And so there was this guy down there named Jay McDowell, who was in a band called Hellbilly, guitar player, rockabilly band. Mm-hmm. And we got to be friends. I met him down in Murfreesboro, and he was coming to all the BR shows, out there drinking every night and watching our band. And so we had this gig, the first gig we ever had out of Roberts. I mean, it was happening, and we couldn't believe that people were coming down, and it was kind of getting good, you know, but it was still rustic down there. There's still people afraid to come down. And we're like, you know, I don't know what we're doing, but it's kind of feels good, and we're making decent money. And
you're having fun, I assume.
Yeah, having fun. And so somehow someone asked us to play the first gig we ever had out of Roberts, and we played at this place called 328 Performance Hall, and we played with Nick Lowe. We opened up for Nick, and that's how I met Nick, you know. That night, we're like, you know, Jay was there, and I'm like, I started calling him Smiling Jay. Smiling Jay, man, you got to get a Doghouse bass player and be our bass player, you know. And Gary and I had talked about it in shop, you know. We're like, yeah, we need a guy. He would be great. And so he thought about it. He's like, because he had Hillbilly, you know, he had his own band. But he thought about it because it was so happening down there. So he said yes, and so we drove all the way to Knoxville to get this upright bass from this music store on a Tuesday. He came back and started practicing on Wednesday, and on Monday we're like, well, hey, why don't you sit in with Shaw and I? Because eventually at Tootsie's, I still played Sundays and Mondays at Tootsie's, and Shaw it would just be him and me, and he'd be having a snare with brushes, and I'd have a guitar, you know, so we had a little rhythm going, and those were always great. Sunday afternoon at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge was killer, and but we had Monday late night show, and we're like, hey Jay, why don't you just come down and, you know, practice playing with us on the Monday night at Tootsie's? And we show up down there, and the place is packed for some reason. It was because Joe Ely was there, and somebody was playing at the Ryman that had just newly opened up, or something was going on. But the place was packed, and Joe Ely and I don't know, somebody else was in the audience that night, and Jay like walking in, the first time he's ever played. But it went over great. We got Jay in the band, and then of course Donnie did join, and he learned how to play steel, straight steel, and so. That kind of rounded out our band. I was only in town for less than 2 years before we had a record deal, which is like, you can't make that shit up.
Right.
We didn't know that it was going to happen. People thought, oh, these guys are just, having a laugh up there. They're lawyers or something that, just having a laugh. And no, this is what I do with my life.
Right.
And it was weird because the place itself was so weird because Robert was real smart, but he was very hillbilly. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, we were playing there one night, and we kept hearing this bell. Ding! Like, what the hell is that bell, And, we'd keep playing, and we'd hear it when we'd stop, and then we realized it was coming in a regular interval. And what it was Robert was training boxers upstairs. There was a boxing ring, and it was the bell for every 3 minutes.
Right.
Right? Until they got, and we're like, what the hell is this thing, And because Robert was a boxer. And, he's tough.
Wow.
I've seen that guy grab a guy from across the bar, punch him all the way down the bar and out the door.
Huh.
And you didn't mess with Robert Moore.
Right.
And you didn't come down there acting up. It took a lot. I mean, it took a lot, but you didn't. I saw a lot of fights down there,
right?
And that's why people were scared. But then by this time, all these people were coming down, and we didn't know that, there were a lot of managers and lawyers and label people down there, but they never talked to us, and the reason was because they never took a break.
Now, was this the beginning of any sort of a scene,
Well, that's what I mean. It was a big scene down there because
right.
There was another guy that was coming down named Greg Gehring who'd been here for a few years, and he ended up getting a job at Tootsie's in the back room, a full hillbilly band. And this guy, Greg had played with a whole bunch of bluegrass people, Jimmy Martin, and he had been around town for a few years, and he's still around town. It's fantastic. And it became kind of a little circus where people would float in and out of going back at Tootsie's on the weekends, because they only played on the weekends. We played Wednesday through Saturday. And then I played Mondays and Sundays at Tootsie's. I worked 6 days a week down there. But those guys played on the weekends, and so it was just like this little scene that happened. It was like a hillbilly circus. And it kind of got a little bit of notoriety. And I believe it was 95. It was fanfare. And, people were coming down. Like, you'd see Marty Stewart coming down out of curiosity, and Steve Earle and the Mavericks. And we got to be friends with all these guys because they were latching on to, there was a cool thing going on down there.
Well, and also, birds of a feather.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean.
You want to hang out with folks
is.
that are liking the same things that you're liking.
Exactly. And at one point, we stopped taking breaks, because if you took a break at midnight, it was a kiss of death. Everybody left. Mm-hmm. Then you wouldn't have a crowd, and you still got to play till 2. And
right.
So we just stopped taking breaks just to keep people in the bar, right? And now they do that all the time down there, and I'm sorry we started that, but we did it just purely financial reasons. But the reason nobody talked to us is because we never took a break. But we ended up getting in business with the people that stayed till 2 to talk to us after that. Like our manager and our lawyer they stayed. They eventually, But there's just tons of weird shit. We would come in, and they would, like one time we came in and on Wednesday to play, and we're like, oh, Robert put a balcony in. It was Robert's office. Now it's a balcony. It was like he's the only club owner that we worked with that when stuff started happening, like great, it didn't all go up his nose or something. It went back into the bar.
Right.
And he was always promoting us, and
that's a rarity, by the way.
Yeah, it really is a rarity.
Because most bar owners they'll head for that white powder first.
Oh yeah.
Everyone I've ever known, actually.
But I guess he'd been down there Robert Moore helped keep that street alive for 35 years before that even happened. You know, he was a bouncer at the old Merchants, you know, boxer, and then ran Tootsie's for a long time. But anyway, so, you know, it was fanfare, and Paul Deacon brings Timothy White, who was the editor of Billboard magazine, into Roberts to see us play. And he got drunk and said, I'm going to put these guys on the cover of Billboard magazine. And he did. And he put us on. It was all about the Lower Broadway, and it had Greg Gehring, and they talked about Tim Carroll, because Tim was down there playing quite a bit too at Tootsie's. And so it was like, all of a sudden, from nothing, where, you know, we didn't know that there were label people actually out there. You know, we'd had a couple of meetings, but they were, you know, they were saying like, well, you know, it'd probably be just you two guys. I mean, we get other people to play on the record. You can play with what, you know. We're like, that's not what we're about. You know, we're about being a band.
Right.
And we didn't want to get Nashville, so we're like, man, we're doing okay. And the next day after that Billboard, there was like 6 labels that wanted to sign us. So we kind of held out, and, you know, meanwhile we had a little production deal with the people out at Castle, and, you know, because people knew that something was happening. So, you know, I moved here in '93, and by '95 we had a record deal, a major label record deal, not,
right.
You know. And it was great to be on Arista Records, because Tim Dubois, who was the president of Arista at the time, they were autonomous here in Nashville because they were so successful. You know, they had Alan Jackson, they had Pam Tillis, they had Brooks and Dunn. You know, they had all these acts that were doing the best of anybody really
right.
at the time. And all those guys were, you know, pretty cool. And Tim Dubois is a songwriter. And he wrote, She Got the Gold Mine and I Got the Shaft. I mean, there's a guy that you should listen to. We didn't always listen to him. In retrospect, we should have right. on a lot of things. But he was, because of his success, he was able to sign us. And because of that, it took us all around the world. And that's why I'm even, you know, can still do what I do, is because we were probably the last era of big record label advantage, where we didn't have to sell our soul completely to the record company like they do now. You know, if you sign a major label, they do what they call a 360 deal, where they get your publishing, your T-shirt money, you know, they get everything.
Yeah. Because they're not making money off sales.
Well, they're not. Yeah, so nobody's buying anything. I mean, we sold almost over 500,000 records on that first record, and we were afraid we weren't going to get signed.
Well, now let me
because we'd only sold that many.
Now, do you think because Arista had so much success with these other people, and obviously had a lot of money coming in because of these other people, do you think they sort of left you to your own devices and didn't try to Nashville you, or did they?
Yeah, well, but we were Nashville.
Well, no, you used the term earlier, like getting Nashvilled.
Oh yeah, where they, you know, they put you and they put you in the cookie cutter mold, right. and no, they let us do that because in their eyes it was bigger. Because when we went out on the road, we would play a show with Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, and then we'd play open up for George Jones, but then we go on tour with the Black Crowes and Bob Dylan, you know.
Yeah, but you.
And that's more worldwide domination right. than just having a hit record on country radio. It's more long arc thinking, which, you know, we didn't really understand it at the time, because we were thinking, well, why can't, you know, and we were on the radio, but that wasn't the be all to end all for them. There was a master plan that probably, if we'd have stuck with it, would have really served us well. And we went to Europe right off the bat. That first record in '96, we went right to Europe, and so now we can go to Europe, you know, and make and do well because of that.
Yeah. All right. So let's go back now. Now BR549 ended in like 2006. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was the last tour.
Now was it rancorous at the end, or was it just sort of throwing up your hands and going like, well?
Well, in 2001, Smilin' Jay and Gary Bennett left the band. Jay's hands were all messed up, and you know, because he did, you know, he went for it every night, and we'd had pretty decent success. We'd changed labels. We were on Sony now. And I don't know, he kind of wanted to start a family. And then, so we were going to try to get another bass player. And then Gary announced that he was quitting. So the last gig that we all played, the original band played together, was at the Grand Ole Opry. And then it was like, you know, we got to thinking, well, just because those guys, like, we put in all this work, you know, why should we give that up? And so Donnie and Shaw and I didn't know what we were going to do, so we decided, you know, after a while, we went back down to Lower Broadway and we were just like playing with some people down there just for gigs because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And we ended up falling in with some people, and Chris Scruggs, who was 19 years old at the time, we were like, hey, you want to, you know, we're gonna kind of keep BR going. You want to play with us? And he thought he was going to be the bass player, but it ended up we got this other guy named Jeff Firebaugh to play bass, and so Chris was the other guitar player and vocalist because we kind of wanted him up front, you know.
I'd like to interject that I told him this morning that from the show last night, he was a great bass player, but his harmony vocals
Oh yeah, it's great.
were spot on.
He's just a great musician. So, you know, we talked to some guys who were forming a new label called Dual Tone, who were from Arista. They had worked at Arista when we were there, and so we, you know, I kind of knew them. And it started out that Dave Rowe, who's was Johnny Cash's bass player the last 20 years of that, and was Dwight Yoakam's bass player. He works a lot with Dan Auerbach now. He's a studio guy. He's everywhere. He's one of the good guys here in town, bass player. He and I produced a couple of records for Dual Tone. A tribute record is a Johnny Cash tribute record with like left of center artists, you know, like Hank the Third and Eddie Angel, and you know, and then we did a Waylon Jennings one, and they came out pretty good. And so like I went to them and I'm like, I'm gonna continue on BR, and so they put out a couple of BR records. But you know, early on, in '97 we went on tour with Bob Dylan, and because Bob took a liking to us, and it was great. He was very generous to us. And we had a great time. It was BR 549, Ani DeFranco, and Bob Dylan. That was the tour, and we had a great time, and still would run into those guys and do the odd show with them, or just run across them and come down to the show. Over the years, Bob would call up Donnie to come play on something out in California or something, and then in 2005, he asked Donnie to join the band, and it was right when we were recording that Dog Days record that Donnie was out with Bob. And so we went on tour in 2006, and he could only do like half of the tour, and then Chris came back. Chris actually, you know, quit the band before we did that last record. He came back and played steel and was like Donnie, you know, steel and guitar and stuff. And at that point, it was like, do we really want to do BR when there's just two guys from the band? It's like, I don't want to do that. So we just kind of hung it up, said we were on hiatus, and didn't play together again until we had a BR 549 reunion. I can't remember what year it was. It's like 4 or 5 years ago. We played with Old Crow out at the Fontanelle. And it was the first time the original guys, you know, all 5 of us had been even in the same room together for 10 years. And it was great. It was really great. And we filmed it and everything. So at least we have film footage of the original BR, you know, if anybody wanted to, you know, watch that. I don't know, we got it at least. Yeah, sure. But anyway, yeah, you know, we did a lot of things over those years. I mean, there was a lot of people that opened up for us that became big stars. It was like we had the touch of gold for other people, you know, like, you know, Keith Urban opened up for us. Jack White was in a band that opened up for us in Detroit. The last tour, the Avett Brothers were opening up.
I guess people lining up to open for you at this point.
Yeah, we got the golden touch. Go on.
So before going out with Bob Dylan, like before you actually met him, did you have any preconceived notions that were?
No, other than anytime I wanted to be inspired to write, I would listen to Bob Dylan or Nick Lowe or both, because that guy is the top of the heap.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he is absolutely the top of the heap. Knows everything about old blues and country and folk music. Man, it's just a treasure trove of wisdom that guy has. But, you don't want to come up and ask him for it. But, he was extremely generous to us.
Approachable?
Yeah, well, he would approach us.
Okay.
We kind of stayed out of his way, but he was always making sure that we were doing okay, and he spent time with us. It was extraordinary.
Well, I
stand there talking to Bob Dylan.
Sure. I wouldn't even blame somebody for being unapproachable. If I had people going through my garbage.
Well, yeah, there's that, and and the last thing he wants to talk about is Bob Dylan.
Now, did you ever meet Bobby Newworth?
Jack or something.
Did you ever meet Bobby Newworth?
No, never did.
Well,
but on that tour, we did run across who am I trying to think of?
It's all right. It happens to me too.
It's a brain fart. Who am I trying to think of? Bass player in the band.
Were you talking about the band? The
band.
Oh, about Rick Danko.
Yeah, Danko showed up to a gig, so I got to meet him.
I would have freaked out.
And he got up and played with Bob. It was really great.
Yeah.
They did some cool fucking songs, and just to be around that vibe and know how to really act in that realm without being gurmy, because no matter what you say, it's hard to be around people like that you've known all your life, but you don't know them.
Right, you've known them from a distance. Or
you know their art and everything, and they mean a lot to you and inspired you and everything, but you don't know them as people until you meet them.
Right.
And been lucky enough to run into a lot of guys like that. We played this big benefit concert in New York for the Rainforest once, and we were the hillbillies on the bill, and it had like Keb Mo and Odetta and Dr. John and Clarence Gatemouth Brown and Jackson Brown and Hubert Sumlin and Keith Richards and
that's a hell of a lineup.
And
really.
Levon Helm, yeah. But Levon took a liking to us. Levon sat in with us at that show, and we spent a lot of time in his hotel room listening to old blues music and telling stories and shit, because he was in it. And I said, man, it's just a gift just to hang out and talk about music and really get into it. And he goes, there ain't nothing else worth a shit.
Well, he's right, because that's what I like doing.
He's
like
absolutely
what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. Everybody gets into it because they're a fan. And for the pussy.
Well, that was my number.
Or the dick, whatever.
Yeah, the minute I sat behind that
sexist.
drum kit. No, the minute I sat behind my drum kit for the first time, it just kept rolling in.
It's a nice thing. But yeah, so to me it's been a gift to be able to sit and talk on a certain level, not on a fan level, but as a fellow musician and people on the road with people like George Jones. I mean, that's why you come down here. I wanted to get up and really learn how to play country music. And the only way you can do that is come down here. I mean, you can go to Austin and learn how to play country music too, but Nashville's Music City. I mean, there's and you feel weird. You look out, I used to look out in the audience and at Roberts and see all these people out there that are just, great musicians. I'm like, what am I doing out there? And then, somebody whispered in my ear once, well, you're the one playing. They're coming to see you.
Yeah.
So it must be something, right?
Yeah, it's got to be a
There's
great
that.
feeling.
There was one night when we came up and we hadn't even started playing yet. We hadn't even set up our equipment on Wednesday night, and we look out and there's Johnny Gimbel and Chet Atkins and Cowboy Jack Clement.
Oh.
I'm like, no pressure there. And then everything went wrong. Like Jay's amp blew up. My guitar was out of tune, so we were playing right or wrong with Johnny Gimbel got up and played, and it was just terrible. And later on somebody asked Chet Atkins, "Hey, how do you like that band BR549?" And he said, "They're really popular." We kind of had a bad night, in front of the guys, So after that, nothing could phase us, And I ended up being great friends with Cowboy Jack. He was a great sage,
And I heard he was a real character too.
Are you kidding me? They don't make characters like that anymore. Yeah. That guy, he was great. He said something, and he tells it to all of his minions, and that is, remember this. We're in the business of fun. If you're not having fun, you're not doing your job.
That's cool.
And I always remember that.
Yeah.
And I pass it along.
Well, thanks.
But anyway, that's why, I came down here to be able to hang out with guys like that. I met Sam Phillips. Yeah. All because I'm in a fucking stupid hillbilly band. But that's what I like. I've dedicated myself to country music, and rock and roll.
Yeah, that's the amazing part. When I was talking to Tim yesterday, he just starts name dropping. He says, "Oh yeah, I was at Levon Helm's barn a couple times." And I'm like,
yeah, that's a great scene. That was a great scene.
Were you there with him?
Yeah, not with him, but I was there I was at a ramble. I went to a ramble once.
Yeah, that must have been awesome.
Yeah, really great, really great. Yeah, Levon, man, he's deep. He's deep into rock and roll. I can show you this picture. I have it on my phone. It's a picture that Fluke Holland, W.S. Holland, who was the drummer with Carl Perkins. The fourth time he sat behind a drum kit, he recorded Blue Suede Shoes, right? And then he became Johnny Cash's drummer till the end. And then he still goes out and does these shows, and he has this program that's basically just a bunch of home photographs that his daughter put in to make a little, went to Kinko's, and
right.
there's some cool photos, photos of like, Joyce, his wife, and WS and Johnny Cash and June in Jamaica, like vacation photos. But then there's also a photo of the car after it was wrecked, that they wrecked
right.
with Carl Perkins on the way up to play the Perry Como show, where Carl got hurt real bad in the car. There's a picture of that, but on the back of it is like this strange picture. It's these guys laying on the floor, stacked up on top of each other. And I'm like, WS, what the hell's going on here? And he's like, oh, that was late night in a hotel room somewhere. And it was like WS was laying on the ground, and they're all looking up at the camera. I'll show you the photo. And Carl's sitting on top of him. And then there was some other guy that he knew that was laying on top of him. And then some guy whose name he couldn't remember that was on top of him. And then 19-year-old Levon Helm with the big and Ronnie
really?
Hawkins was one of the stacked up people too. And then there's Levon. I mean, he's deep. And he was telling me that, it's like high school auditorium somewhere over there in Arkansas. He saw Elvis, Scotty, and Bill. Mm-hmm. And he was just, twisted his life around. And he said, but then they come back next year and they had a drummer. So he saw Elvis 2 times before he was Elvis. Wow. And just, here's the photo. And I wish your podcast people could see it because it's pretty amazing.
Oh my God. Look at that.
Look on top. It's Levon, man.
Really
He's
young.
19 years old.
That is amazing. Yeah.
And then of course WS is like, oh yeah, that's Levon.
Yeah.
Because they all knew him, It was like, and Harold Jenkins was all part of that, better known as Conway Twitty.
So maybe Johnny Cash would have been in the picture if he hadn't been outside eating cake behind a bush.
Well, that might not even been on a Cash tour. That was probably after Cash.
Well,
they did a bunch of road trips together.
Have you seen that picture where Johnny Cash is sitting in a bush eating a cake?
Yeah, that was a little later on.
Yeah.
But that's probably like 1959 there.
That's really cool.
And he was the only member. He was the only member of the band that was actually from the U.S., right? They were all Canadian.
Yeah, they were all Canadian. Well, it's because Ronnie went up with his band to Canada after the rock and roll rockabilly thing kind of started to die out in the U.S. It was still going on up there in Canada. You know, found some gigs. You go where the work is.
Right.
And so Lee went up there with him, and eventually they all kind of fell in. I think Robbie was the first one to come in, and then they picked up the other guys a little bit along the way.
Right.
But you know, what a killer band, what a killer background, and it all and then they start making that majestic music up there in the mountains, which is like, just because I think someone should dig this music doesn't mean that they're going to get it, but that doesn't mean they're idiots.
Right.
Unless they don't like Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, then they can
all
go
bets are
fuck
off.
If you don't like Hank Williams, you can kiss my ass.
Do you know that Don Walser song, "The Party Don't Start Till the Playboys Get Here"?
No.
Really?
That's a great one.
No, it's a really
I do
good
know.
song.
I've seen him sing it before.
Yeah.
We played a bunch of shows with Don
Did
Walser
you?
back in the day. Yeah, we'd play festivals for him. It was hard for him to get around though. His wife was always with him.
He had to sit down when he played.
But he sang his ass off, and what a great guy.
Yeah.
You know, we met a lot of cool people like the Eddie Pennington up there in Kentucky. He's like one of the greatest Travis pickers that I know of, and Deke knows that guy.
Yeah.
And he's a historian, but he's the singing coroner. He's the coroner for his county.
Nice.
But what a great picker, man, and what a great guy. Again, you run across these people playing festivals with them, or you know.
Right.
Or seek them out, you know. If you want to meet somebody, go seek it out. There was tons of things that I regret because we were at a point where there were certain things that we could make happen, and I just didn't do it. Like, for instance, I could have gone to our manager at one point or somebody and said, hey, I want to write a song with Waylon Jennings, and they could have made it happen. Why didn't I do that? Because I'm a fucking moron, that's why. I would have loved to have written a song with Waylon Jennings.
Why don't we just
and
say you
I could have
didn't
made
think of
happen.
it at the time?
Well, no, I'm an idiot because we were so up our own asses, you know, and you know, but that's just you know,
Did you
can't
ever
do
meet
anything
Gary?
about it.
Did you ever meet Gary Stewart?
No, he passed away before.
I only went to South by Southwest once ever, and I saw Don Walser, Junior Brown, Gary Stewart, and Butch Hancock, all like in the same day and a half span.
That's great. Butch Hancock's another big man. He used to come to Lawrence. There was a guy named Rick Friedman who had a radio show on KGHK, the college radio station there in Lawrence, and his specialty show on Saturday was called The Ethnic Cowboy. Rick Friedman, and that was where I was turned on to people like Guy Clark's music and Townes Van Zandt and Butch Hancock and Joe Ely and you know all that Texas singer-songwriter,
right.
and Kinky Friedman and all those guys, and he would have you know these things called the Kaw Valley Songwriting Contests, and he would bring those guys up from Texas to be the judges, and then you know they'd have songwriting workshops and shit. And Butch Hancock used to come up a lot to Lawrence, and you know, that guy's gold, man.
Right. Well, him and Jimmy Dale Gilmore and Joe Ely all went to the high school with the legendary Stardust Cowboy. They were all at the same time. Have you ever been to Joe Ely's house?
No, I've never been invited.
Well,
I'd like to go to Joe Ely's house.
We went a couple times because we interviewed him for the movie. At his house, it's like, of course, it's out in the middle of the desert. You know, where else would it be? But it's lined with these weird sort of powder blue Chinese tiles, but in between the tiles he's got harmonicas embedded in the sides of his house, so that when the wind blows from different directions, he has a constant like.
Yes. Oh, and that's all the time in Texas.
Yeah.
That's like Kansas. There's nothing between Texas and Kansas. Actually, there's nothing between Canada and Texas except for like 16 trees.
All right. Well, this I don't want to take up your whole day, but I do want to get the timeline to the current here. So after BR 549 were no longer in existence, were you kind of worried, like, oh shit, what am I going to do now?
Well, I didn't know what I was going to do, and it just so happened that our old manager Barry Coburn had this one of the biggest independent publishing houses in Nashville called 1010 Music, and I got a songwriting deal. So for 2 years, I'd sit in a room with a bunch of guys like you, and with a blank piece of paper and come out with something. And I really learned how to co-write then. I wasn't too good at it before. There was a couple of times where I tried and I just wasn't good at it, because I wasn't letting myself be good at it. But I ended up writing with a lot of cool people and learning a lot, because I had to come up with songs. That was my job. And my first solo record, Journeyman's Wagers, they're all co-writes because they all came out of that. Right. I wanted to put that record out to like basically pitch songs to people, because I didn't know, what was going to happen with me. And then simultaneous to that, I got a call from Colin Escott, who you probably know because he wrote a lot of Bear Family liner notes. He wrote the definitive Hank Williams biography, and he wrote the history of Sun Records. Yeah. And he called me up and he said, "You ever thought about working in the musical theater?" And I'm like, "Not really. What's up?" And he's like, "Well, I've written this thing about the $1 Million Quartet." And I said, "Well, I know that music." And they were looking for a music director that could, well, he was. There was some discussion between the producers at the time on which way to go, because they wanted it to be real rockabilly as opposed to like some guy in New York music director's idea of rock and roll or rockabilly. And so they gave me a shot. I'd never done it before. I didn't even own an iPod at the time. And we went down to they vibed me. They first had a meeting. One producer was completely against me. How could we have a music director who doesn't know how to read music? But one of the other producers was John Cassette, who was the owner of the Grammy show. His father invented the Grammys. And he's an old rock and roll guy, and he immediately kind of recognized what I was. And so they wanted to give me a chance. So we went down to Florida and did this working production of it. And I didn't know how to approach it except for as a record producer. Just produce a record, but it's live. Okay, kind of play this, and that doesn't work. Let's try this. Well, let's try it this way. And to put together all these arrangements, sort of a collaborative thing, which is I found out is the nature of musical theater anyway. It's very collaborative, and which turned me on. And it turned out good down there. And then we did another working production up in Issaquah, Washington in 2007, and then in 2008 we went all pro and opened up in Chicago, where it ran for 8.5 years. And then in 2010 we were in Broadway, and the guy that played Jerry Lee Lewis won a Tony for it. So I'm sitting there at the Tony Awards going, what the fuck am I doing here? And we were up for Best Musical and Best Book for a musical too, but Levi ended up winning the Tony. And then we went to the West End in London, so I stayed in London for 3 months or so. Lived in London, which was very cool. And putting that in, it just kind of took me places. And then they did 4.5 years of national tour. We played 5 years in Las Vegas, and there's still a whole bunch of productions now. It's in what they call non-equity world, where they've licensed the play and they use my arrangements, but I don't have anything to do with it.
Right. Does something like this, does this get you a check in the mail once in a while?
It does.
Really?
It
I know virtually nothing.
And that's the thing about musical theaters, they actually pay their royalties.
Really?
Yes. It's not like the record business where you got to go bang on someone's desk to get what is actually yours.
Right.
But it's an enormous challenge, and it was a great way to think of myself in a different way, And now I can do that just because I said yes, and it turned into the TV show and everything.
That was my next question. Yeah. So
Colin invited me. That there was they'd sold the rights to be a TV show or film, and the executive producer was in town to meet with Colin, who also was the writer on that show, one of the writers on the show. And I was playing a gig up at the Acme Feed and Seed, and he brought Leslie in to see me, he and his wife, and he ended up staying till 2 a.m, buying all my records and saying, hey, because he had just done this show called Texas Rising. It was about after the Alamo, the Battle of San Jacinto, and it was directed by Roland Joffe too. And it had Bill Paxton and a bunch of people in it. And they said, hey, and Leslie's like, hey, you should come down to San Antonio and play the big premiere for it down there at the Alamo. And Chris Christopherson was in the show too, and they had Jose Feliciano had a song in the show. So we flew down to the Alamo, not a club called the Alamo, but the fucking Alamo, and we backed up Chris Christopherson and Jose Feliciano that night. Wow. And that's how I pulled that off, and so he trusted me with the music for Sun Records, and that's how that came about. But all the time I was kind of making that actually kind of came at a time where I would usually put another record out.
Right.
Because it was 2014, I put the Free State Serenade record out, which was like a little love letter to my home state of Kansas.
Right.
And so it would have been time for me to do another record probably, but I ended up working on that show, and it kind of took a year out of my life, and that's why I didn't release a record till this year. But and then before that, I did a record of all country and rockabilly covers called Back at the Quonset Hut.
Right. Where
I went to the Quonset Hut here, which was the first studio on Music Row, built by Harold Bradley and Owen Bradley, in a boarding house where they recorded Bebop-A-Lula in the basement, and then they stuck on an Army surplus Quonset Hut on the back, and it became like that's where they recorded Crazy and tons of shit recorded at the Quonset Hut, and they just redone it, and it was owned by Belmont. So Mike Janis, who produced the first co-produced the first 3 or 4 BR 549 records, and I've known since he was in the original Homestead Grays band from Kansas. And so I called him up and I said, hey, can I do this record? And it was the first commercial record made in the Quonset Hut, for years, since Swingin'.
Right.
And so I had this thing where I would do all these country covers, and I had my band in there, and I called Chris Scruggs up to be a session guy, and Wes Langlois, who plays in his hillbilly band now. But then I got like some of the original A-Team guys to augment my band on a bunch of cuts. Like I got Bob Moore to play bass, and Pig Robbins played piano, and Buddy Spiker was playing fiddle, and Harold Bradley, the most recorded guitarist in recording history, was playing on my record and encouraging. And it was just so great to see the new with the old and all mixed in, and we were doing it all live. And I had some people come in and sing, like Bobby Bear came in and sang a Carl Smith tune with me, because I basically got acquainted with Bobby Bear because I was acquainted with Carl Smith.
Right.
And so he wanted to do that because he loved Carl, and Elizabeth Cook came and played it. We did a great session of Wabash Cannonball with the Old Crow Medicine Show.
Do you ever just sit down and go, God damn, I've got a great job?
Well, exactly. I do stuff like that. That night I was sitting at a restaurant waving my union card around. Hey, look at me. I fucking play with the A-Team. There's been a couple of times. We did this years ago in BR, the original BR, at the Old Country Music Hall of Fame. They were going to start doing this concert series called Nashville Skyline Review, and they put up a stage in the parking lot. You could see the city from up there on Music Row, and they had a concert. And that night we backed up Charlie Pride and Bobby Bear and Raul from the Mavericks, and Dina Carter and Dean Miller, Roger Miller's son,
right,
and Ernie Ashworth. We played Jump Back Trembling Lips, he had his lip shirt on and everything. And it was just so great to be hanging out with those guys and having little Jimmy Dickens know my name. To me, that's a gift.
Yeah.
And I've played the Opry like 140 times now, and I love that place. And I'm always glad. I hope I'm available every time they give me the call.
Right.
Because I want to go up there and I do a pretty good job.
Well, again, nice work if you can get it.
Yeah. And so there's times in my life, like after that Nashville Skyline show, I was waving my union card around too. I'm like, fucking look at me. Yeah, it's weird. Some people are made to feel uncomfortable around this town for a long time. Jewish people for sure, and black folks. It's this weird underlying racism and sexism too.
Right.
Well,
I think they also said that wasn't Nashville, before Nashville was a music city, wasn't this the place where like 99% of the world's Bibles were printed?
I don't know about that.
They said that in the documentary.
But
they said that
there was a lot of
Nashville
Bibles printed here. Yeah. Oh, this is the buckle of the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
But it's also for sale to the highest bidder.
Right.
You know, and always has been. Ever since, you know, the unions have occupied, the Union Army has occupied Nashville. Oh, okay. Well, we'll do business with you. The rebels are back. Okay, we'll do business with you.
Do you have good songs?
Whatever. You know, it's just a long history of that. And they hated the hillbillies. They really, you know, Carl Smith told me one time that he said, Chuck, back when I was doing my thing, if you had a cowboy suit on or they knew you were in the country music business, people in this town would walk across the street not to have to walk past you. He said the only people that liked us in this town were the bankers and the car dealerships.
That's a good quote too.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a true story. But anyway, so then, you know, now I'm kind of into everything, and I'm trying to work wherever I can work, and, you know, I get to go around and play my music, but then I get to work on other people's music, and, you know, I just say yes.
Right.
I'll try that.
Well, it sounds like your move from Lawrence was successful.
I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
I think we made a good little life here, you know. My wife has a great job, and, you know, that's, well, you know the definition of a successful musician, don't you?
No, go ahead.
His wife has 2 jobs.
Oh. Yeah, I used to collect musician jokes. I mean, I'm sure you've heard most of them. You know, what do you do if you have a bass player on your porch?
And pay him for the pizza.
Pay him for the pizza.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you ever? You know when a homicide and a banjo are alike?
No.
Everybody likes it better when the case is closed.
Did you ever hear about Henny Youngman going to the White House?
No.
This is a true story. He was going to the White House and he got stopped by Secret Service, and they're like, "What's in the violin case?" And he goes, "A machine gun." He says, "Okay, fine. We just didn't want it to be your violin."
I like that one a lot.
Yeah. And then there was another one. I don't know if I can remember to tell it right or not, but there's a rabbit in a forest, and he's blind, so he hasn't been able to look in a mirror to see what he looks like, and he's just very confused about what it is he's supposed to be doing, what it is he's supposed to be eating. So he's wandering through the forest. He runs across a snake, and the snake also has the same problem, and says, "Hey, wait a minute, maybe we can help each other out here. Hold on a second." So the snake wraps himself around the rabbit, and he goes, "Okay, you're furry. You got a kind of a bushy tail here and long ears. I think you're a rabbit." I guess, "Oh man, that's great. Now I eat carrots. I'm gonna hop around the forest. I'm gonna have a good time. Great. Okay, hold on. Let me do you." So the rabbit gets down and he starts touching the snake, and he goes, "Okay." He says, "You're low to the ground. You're kind of cold and slimy. You don't have any ears. Ah, you're an A&R man for a major label."
Yes, I like that one.
Yeah, hour and a half. It hasn't felt like it.
You ought to have something. You even got Jesse Dayton on there for a little bit.
Yeah, well, I do some judicious editing. Mostly I edit out every time I say I wish yesterday Tim Carroll made the request that I could do the same for him. And I'm like, okay.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. I just remembered another one. What's the difference between RCA Records and the Titanic?
I don't know.
The Titanic had a good band.
Hey, wait a minute. Elvis is on RCA.
Well, this was later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Oh, wow. How cool.
Yeah, I saw it earlier. That's really cool.
Yeah. By the way, what do you think of that White Album package?
I love it.
I spent like one whole night reading and like listening and reading and
It's
listening.
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's a tribute to the Beatles' business prowess that they sell us the same music over and over again for the last 50 odd years. And I buy it.
Yeah.
Although I didn't get the Sgt. Pepper thing, the remix of that. I heard that's really great, and I listened to it.
It is really good.
But I should probably get it. But the White Album was one of my favorites because it's like they got back to the real rock and roll.
Right.
And you know, Sgt. Pepper is what it is, and I know a lot of people really hate it. I love it. I still listen
love
to
it
those
too,
songs.
but
I think it's great.
I understand people's criticism of it, but they weren't there. If
It was a time
If you were
and a
there
place.
at the time, yeah.
Is a time and a place. You know, I consider Rubber Soul and Revolver as the White Album Part 1. Those are my two favorite records.
Sure. I pre-ordered the Abbey Road one too. So.
Yeah, I don't know why they should remix that one though. Just remaster it.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm not cutting anybody down.
Oh no, like Kiss, I'm getting it for the book probably. So.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be great pictures.
Yeah.
I just can't wait for Let It Be the movie to come back out with all the extra
I'm
clips.
really wondering about how they're going to do that.
Oh, they'll do it.
Because, well, one, the Beatles have always said it was this horrible, terrible time for themselves, and yet there's all this footage and audio clips of them laughing and having a good time and doing all this stuff.
Again, it's a narrative, and they say the same thing about the White Album. Oh, they were imploding. Ringo quit, and sure, maybe that happened. But you listen to those Escher demos, and they're having a great time.
Exactly. It sounds like their best buddies.
They just got back from India. Hey.
Yeah. Where they've been watching
hey, look,
monkeys
we got all these
the
songs.
road.
Yeah, look at all these songs. Yeah. What are we going to do with them? Oh, a double record.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but people just like their narrative because then it's like an arc. Mm-hmm. It's a TV show. It's the same thing with, the only people that can know what actually happened were the people who were there. And that's it. Yeah. So all those Beatle people can kiss my ass, even though I'm one of them.
I'm one of them too.
It's amazing though. I listen to the Beatles channel on Sirius, and my wife gets so annoyed with all the Beatle dorks, and talking about minutia. And, I'm kind of getting into it, and she's like, "Oh my God."
Do you remember the Bob Dylan bootleg box called Ten of Swords? At the time, it was like at the time when it came out, it was a box set that came out about 6 months after Biograph, and it was like full of all the stuff you'd heard about but never heard. Perfect sound quality, nice book in it. But there was a quote in the book, and it said something like, "Many Dylanologists feel that this song, blah 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 blah," and then the next sentence was, "But most Dylanologists are shitheads."
Was that the first bootleg series?
No, this was an actual bootleg.
Oh,
called Ten of Swords.
Oh, wow.
And it was funny is I wasn't really into Bob Dylan up to that point. A little bit here and there, but not much. And for some reason, this expensive 20 disc or 10 disc bootleg set, I was like, okay, maybe that should be the first Bob Dylan album I should ever buy. And it was. My first one was this bootleg box. And so I have this funny thing. I'm not going to go into it now, but sometimes I talk to people about like when they get their favorite band, did they get the wrong album first? Like for instance, my uncle was always telling me about, hey, the Rolling Stones, they were the first punk band. You got to, that's what you got to listen to. And the first one I got was Some Girls, and I'm like, I love that album now, but at the
last great Stones album.
It is, but at the time I'm going, punk rock. What the fuck is he talking about, punk rock? And
Shattered, come on, man.
And like my first Who album was By Numbers. Now I like that record a lot, but it's not known as like their best record. Sometimes you get the wrong record first.
Right.
My first Big Star record was the third one. Right. And I'm like, well, it's a great record, but maybe I should have started at the beginning, And now I completely forgot what I was getting at. So I get the brain fart too.
It happens.
Yeah. So, we can take a couple pictures if you don't mind. And
sure.
I definitely want to get a picture of you holding that up.
Okay. I'll take the wrapping off of
and then we'll stop bugging you.
It doesn't glare. Yeah, I got to get these things up. Yeah, that's pretty good. Somebody joked that was, who's this guy? Is that Robert with a suitcase full of money? And then you put this lady playing drums down here. Does my toupee look all right?
Oh, now I remember what I was going to ask you when you mentioned Gene Vincent earlier. Did you happen to see that thing that Deke did about trying to find Cliff Gallop's guitar?
Yes.
Oh my God!
I love that.
Like 2/3 of the way through.
This way,
okay.
That light is like.
All right. Yeah, like 2/3 of the way through reading that, I realized I'd been reading it for 2 hours.
Yeah.
All right. 3, 2, 1. One more safety. 3, 2, 1. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, because when it started, I was like, well, this is interesting. Maybe and I'm like, and then there's like 5 paragraphs about the 7 on the receipt.
He actually found it though, didn't he?
Well, he thinks he did, but when he finally got to the end, he was kind of like, well, it sure looks like it, but maybe, it was.
You can't say for sure.
It was after he opened it up and was showing the solder, and the old, and I'm like going, man, Pete is fucking serious.
He is serious.
He really, he's so cool though, and he's so nice. He had no reason at all for to invite us into his house for an entire afternoon. Because it wasn't just to talk. I really, really wanted to see that Connie Horton stereo.
Yeah, man. I was excited for him when he got that.
Yeah, because when he posted on Facebook that he was going to get it, I was like going, oh man, look at that.
It's fancy.
Yeah, and when I did you watch that little film I did?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and I was when I got there, I was like, Dee, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but can I please just get a little thing on that stereo? And that's when we sort of asked him to pick up some interesting things that he had found here and there, and.
Well, all I have is the Maryland Chambers Ivory Snow thing.
Dude, that is awesome. That's really cool. I
do have this.
I've never seen one in person.
I took these photos of John and Yoko.
I don't remember Crawdaddy being in that.
This is the first one.
Format.
That's the first one.
Well, no, it's not the first one. It's one of the first
Crawdaddy was
ones.
a slick magazine when I used to see it.
Yeah, this was actually interviewed with Yoko, but yeah, she took those photos of John and Yoko. She took a bunch of them.
Cool. Well, I gotta tell you got one of the coolest man caves I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yes, I love this place.
Except that Deke's whole house is a man cave.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing where, years ago I was doing some research on an amp that I was selling, so I had to get on the Fender Amp Forum, which is just like a collection of, I don't know, total geeks. But there was a picture of this guy that had all these old Tweed amps, different ones all stacked up, and below it says, these are my bedroom Tweeds. And I'm like, that guy has all those amps in his bedroom, and my wife was like, I know what he doesn't have in his bedroom. A woman.
And she's right.
Oh, I know she's right.
Yeah.
She's always right.
Yeah. Well, I can't
All right,
I can't thank you enough. This was
No,
really
thank
nice.
you,
so
man.
much. It's great meeting you.
And I hope you don't mind that if I'm ever down here again, which is a real possibility, I might contact you and ask you if you know any interesting people who wouldn't mind talking to a stranger that they don't know. Because I bet, like Deke, you probably know just about everybody in town.
Well, I know some. I don't know everybody, but I know a lot. Hey, watch your step there now.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm
right,
good.
guys.
Well, thank you
Take
so
care.
much
Nice to
again.
meet you guys.
I'll keep in
After the hurricane, after the wind and rain, when we lost everything after the hurricane, it was not the driving rain that let our love go down the drain. It was not the howling wind that blew away the hopes I pinned. After the hurricane, after the wind and rain, when we lost everything after the hurricane. We were sheltered from the storm in what we thought was safe and warm. We survived the rising tide, but there's no place that we could hide. After the hurricane, after the wind and rain, when we lost everything after the hurricane. Things are scattered, things got tossed, but that was not what we had lost. It's a way of